we found through research that if you want a hair transplant, you might want to follow these steps as well. People that have had a hair transplant, they say it's unsuccessful, but a lot of times it's just because they got the hair transplant done and that's everything they did. I always talk about this. Here's an example. If your teeth are crooked and you get braces done and you get the braces off and your teeth are straight, if you don't wear your retainers, your teeth will go back to crooked. And so, with that in mind, you can kind of follow the conversation where it is going. You can get a hair transplant, but what do you suggest? What is something that you've done to keep your hair that you would say would benefit somebody who just got the hair transplant to ensure it lasts longer or maybe forever?
I mean, look, just to be clear, right?
Mm,
If you're balding, that means that genetically your hair is more sensitive to DHT. So when your body naturally produces it, it reacts to it and it falls out, which is completely natural. Nothing bad
right.
about that.
Mm.
So if you get hair transplants, it's still your hair.
Still you.
You're still moving your hair to the front, which is still sensitive to DHT as well. Now the side
Right.
ones, for whatever reason, are less. That's true, but the rest of your head still is,
Mm.
right? So if you have a receding hairline or a crown is forming, and you put hairs from your sides on there, right? Those hairs might stay, but the rest of the hair that's always been on top will
Mm.
still be affected genetically, right? By
Right.
DHT. So what you want to do is take preventative measures still. After you get a hair transplant, and again, consult with a professional, right? But typically, once you get the hair transplant, you still want to be on like finasteride, right, which blocks DHT. That's where you can stop hair loss from continuing after the surgery. If not, what you get, which I have seen several times before, is people get a hair transplant, it kind of looks good, and then over time, their original hair that was on top is still thinning out and balding. So then you end up with people that only have just the hairline or just the area that was transplanted,
Mm.
where the rest of the head is now bald,
Mhm.
right? So
And
you
you
don't want that to happen.
right. So you would say, I guess in both scenarios, it seems like you would benefit from taking finasteride.
Exactly, exactly. Whether you're trying to keep what you have and just like what I did, just kind of keep what you have and be okay with that, or whether you're trying to get a hair transplant, regardless, you want to prevent further hair loss, right? So finasteride is like the main one to use for that. There's other supplements, other things you can take, like dutasteride as well, which again, do your own research, consult that. But finasteride is the most common one.
Mm, yeah, he brought up a lot of good points, and I didn't even think about that. So he's right. If you already lost your hair, and that's the reason why you're gonna get a transplant, I guess you've proven already that you're sensitive to the HT, and having a hair transplant is not going to undo that. That's just
Correct.
part of who you are, meaning you will keep on being sensitive to DHT, which means you will keep on losing hair potentially.
Exactly.
And that's what you want to take care of. Taking finasteride, which again, I haven't taken, he has. So there are some side effects that you might have to be aware of. Like he says, do your research, look that up. But that's the whole idea. Again, he hasn't had a transplant, and I haven't either. But this is information that you probably should consider if you're gonna get a transplant done or you're thinking about it. Or like he said, if you are losing your hair and you want to keep what you got, you should probably follow that as well. Give it a shot. I think it's worth it. I always say, again, if I had hair or if I knew this before, I would have done it.
Yeah. So based on the research that I've done, it's always easier to keep what you already have rather than regrow what you've lost.
Mm,
If you're trying to regrow what you've lost, that's when a transplant comes into conversation.
mm,
But once you take that action, again, you still want to do your best to keep what you have plus what you now have added on, right?
right, right.
So again, just do the finasteride. That tends to help. It's a pill a day. Um, and yeah, some common side effects. The most common one is like a drop in libido, which could affect you if you're older. For me, I haven't had that, probably because I'm still kind of young. Um, but some things to consider. I do know it helps lower the likelihood of certain cancers, like a lot of cancers that affect the prostate. So that's another advantage of that as well. Um, but regardless, just do your own research to ensure the best possible outcome. Aside from that, the other thing I'd say is if you're getting a hair transplant, then you want to heavily consider aesthetics, right? Typically, people that get a hair transplant, it's not just to grow back their hair, but they want it to look natural. You don't want to get a hair transplant and people obviously know that you got a hair transplant.
Right.
They'll know at first, right, as it's growing in, but after it grows out, you want it to look natural, as if
Yep.
it was always like that. To achieve that, right, there's certain things to consider. One of the things would be um, have it match a natural hairline, right? Depending on your age, your hairline might be slightly receded, right? If you are gonna put a hair transplant on that receded area, you don't always want to have it be fully straight. I don't even have it fully straight, and I'm 24, right? It's natural to have a bit of recession on the edges, right? So sometimes keeping that intentionally during your transplant makes it look more natural. Another thing to consider, in addition to this, and not all clinics do this. I've seen a few that do it in the U.S., but some clinics will get baby hairs transplanted, like kind of thinner hairs on the edge as well. That way, like at the very, very edge, that way it blends in better with the rest of the hair. Because you'll see this often, people that get hair transplants, when you look closely, you can kind of see it almost looks like a doll's hair. You can see every individual strand poking out. They look, when people say plugs, that's what I imagine. It's like
Right.
you can see kind of between the hairs,
Right.
and it looks like a doll's head, right? To prevent that, because naturally you have baby hairs at the edge before the hair actually thickens, the hair strands thickens. So some places can actually help with that as well. Some places would actually get thinner hairs that are on your head, and they'll put it right on the edge there, and then put in the thicker hairs behind it. That way it blends in better.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to consider as well.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of SMP. I've gotten a lot of questions about that. And just like with that, there's a big risk of you looking like you have fake hair. And so sometimes the good clinics may cost a little more money or whatever. But if this is something that you actually want to do, you should probably save money. It's okay, right? Like put that money aside for this because it's going to be worth it. You don't want to get a cheap job done. And then now the new problem is you have hair, but the new problem is that you're insecure about how the hair looks, which is ironic because you were insecure that it was falling out.
It's a permanent thing. It's kind of like tattoos, right? You wouldn't go to an amateur who's just starting out to get a tattoo design, right? You'd probably go to someone who is an expert, has done it for years, and is good at designing it, right?
Right.
So, likewise, when it comes to your head, you don't want to play around with that. You only have a certain amount of hair follicles to play with, and you really don't want to mess that up.
That's true. All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching. Again, if you're looking for products for your bald head, say, your hair transplant is past that point because it failed and you're trying to shave your head, I'm here for you. I got a bunch of videos regarding head shaving and what to do and how to take care of your scalp. The link below has products, the only products you will need to take care of your scalp.